Lean in. Closer. The fire is dying, and the dampness in this Pacific air, it settles deep into the marrow. You think you know what isolation feels like. You think a map tells you the whole truth. It doesn't. Look at the rain out there. It sweeps across the Chiloé Archipelago like a shroud. 7 islands. Endless mud. Fog so thick it swallows the horizon. But it wasn't the sea that trapped the people here. It was what lived beneath the floorboards. Notice the silence. No dogs barking. No night birds calling. Just the heavy, dead air. It smells like wet earth, old timber, decaying leaves, and something else, a faint metallic tang, like rusted iron or old blood dried on stone. The locals don't talk about it, not to outsiders. They pull their wool ponchos tight. They stare at the floor. If you ask about the year 1880, they cross themselves. But their eyes look down, always down. They are listening, because beneath the foundations of the grand colonial churches, where the priests sang their Latin hymns, another kingdom was breathing. A shadow state. La Recta Provincia, the righteous province. They didn't use crowns of gold. They used something far more permanent. It started when the Spanish crown turned its back, leaving these islands to rot in the cold southern rain. The old ways didn't die. They just went underground. Literally. They say a royal cartographer named José de Moraleda y Montero crossed paths with a Huiliche Machi, a woman named Chilpilla. She froze his ship in the mud, leaving it bone dry on the shore with a wave of her hand. To buy his freedom, he gave her a book, a European grimoire, a manual of shadows. That book became the law. Years later, researchers would uncover dusty, forgotten archives titled The Architecture of Secrecy, Subterranean Fortification, Teratogeny, and the Socio-Political network of Chiloé's Recta Provincia. But back then, the names were only whispered, never written. By the mid-19th century, the shadow state was fully formed, operating secretly as the República de la Raza Indígena. They divided the islands into 7 districts, high courts, rules, taxes. La Mayoría sat in judgment. If you lived in a casa abierta, an open house, you paid your mandatory contributions to the agentes de seguros, the insurance agents. You paid them in grain. You paid them in silver. If you paid, you were safe from malevolent witchcraft. If you refused, well, your livestock rotted from the inside out. Your children woke up screaming. The administrative hubs like Quicaví, codenamed Lima, held absolute sway. Other sectors like Tenaun, known as Santiago, coordinated high-level tactical movements and guarded official titles. The center of it all was the Cueva de Quicaví, a coastal sanctuary near Kemchi. Black sand, gray water. Hidden in the dense coastal brush was a massive, flat stone slab sealing the entrance. It wasn't a natural cavern. It was engineered. Carved out of the wet earth, reinforced with thick beams of decay-resistant alerce timber to withstand the frequent seismic activity. Inside, they didn't hold savage revels. No. They sat at a large central wooden table. They kept neat ledgers. They wrote laws. They signed death warrants.
The air down there was stagnant, chilled. It smelled of sulfur, damp tallow candles, and the bitter, suffocating scent of crushed latoué berries. To enter that room, you had to bleed out the old world. Initiates stood naked under the freezing cascade of the 150-meter-tall Tokowiwe waterfall. 40 consecutive winter nights. 40 nights of ice-cold water pounding on flesh, washing away the Christian baptism. Then they led you into the pitch-black tunnels of the cave. The old stories claim they made you drink the bitter, binding fluids of the Shadow Brotherhood to completely sever your ties to the Christian world. You weren't a citizen of Chile anymore. You belonged to the soil.
But a secret society needs eyes. It needs guards. Human men can be bought. They can be broken by torture. They have families. La Mayoría needed something without a conscience. So they grew one. They called it the Imbunche. It starts with a firstborn male child, under 9 days old, no baptism. A gift from a desperate family bartering for lifelong protection, or taken from a cradle in the dead of night. They took the soft, pliable bones of the infant, and they reshaped them. They broke the right leg, twisting it upward and sewing it securely along the spine. They turned the head 180 degrees backward, forcing the child's face to look permanently over its spine. They split the tongue with a sharp fragment of ritual glass, a serpent's tongue. No words, only a grating, guttural shriek. They bathed the creature in pico chiwin, a toxic herbal grease from the deep forest waterfalls. It turned the skin into a thick, leathery hide, sprouting a dense, coarse, animalistic pelage. They fed it on the milk of black cats. Then, when it grew teeth, oral traditions tell us they fed it cavicho, the roasted flesh of infants exhumed from local cemeteries. The Imbunche lived for generations in the dark of Quicaví, outliving multiple generations of warlocks. It crawled on 3 limbs, hopping through the mud of the tunnels. It didn't speak, but it knew. It sat on the floor of the council chamber, listening to the kings argue, acting as an advisor to the High Council. And when the warlocks walked the island paths at night to cast a curse, they carried the creature through the forests. If you heard that wild, terrifying cry echoing from the ravines, you put out your candles. You locked your doors. You buried your face in your hands. You knew La Mayoría was active.
And then came the poison. They didn't just use fear, they used chemistry. Latua pubiflora, the Warlock's tree, rich in tropane alkaloids like scopolamine. A single infusion of its leaves, and your mind dissolved into a violent delirium and persistent insanity. They used what the elders named silmai, a vine extract containing a potent neurotoxin that stops the heart mid-beat. Or the bocado, a fine powder made from sun-dried lizards, toads, and pulverized toxic ants. They would blow it through a tube into your mouth while you slept. You would wake up with an unquenchable thirst. Your stomach would swell with rapid abdominal distension. Within days, your organs simply failed, resulting in an agonizing, wasting death. By 1880, the Republic of Chile had enough, launching a massive military and police sweep across the archipelago. They dragged over 100 suspected warlocks, including the regional king, Santiago Rayin, and the female judge, Aurora Quinchen, to the prison at Ancud. The judges demanded evidence. They wanted the corpus delicti. They wanted chemical extractions of the toxins. But Chiloé doesn't give up its dead. The soil is too acidic. The rain washes the evidence into the remote parochial cemeteries. The witnesses looked at the judges, then thought of the remaining warlocks watching through the reflective waters of the Chilanco stone vessels, and they stayed silent. The high courts in the north, rational and blind, dismissed the charges of witchcraft. They released the majority of the warlocks on appeal. The state thought they won. They thought they brought civilization to the frontier. They were wrong. The warlocks went back to the islands. The entrances to the cave were covered with stone and brush. A century-long performative silence settled over the archipelago. Everyone agreed to pretend it was just folklore, just nursery tales told to hide a resilient network of traditional authority. But look out at the dark tonight. Listen to that rain. The Chilean judges are long dead, but the Chilanco stone mirrors are still there, hidden in the cliffs. The formulas for the Latue are still intact. The Shadow Republic never left. Lean closer. The fire isn't dying. It's being watched. Watch your step in the dark. Some thresholds are still guarded.